And welcome back. We're moving into our final conversation for today, and we have been joined by members of the newly formed organization PETAL. PETAL stands for Promoting Empowerment Through Awareness for Lesbian and Bisexual Women. And joining us for this conversation, we have the treasurer, Charisse Talbert. We have technical advisor, Dr. Abigail McKay, and we have coordinator Simone Hill. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting us.
Now, let's talk a little bit about PETAL and where did this idea originate from and what prompted or the need for an organization like this?
Well, one of the things I noticed, I had joined UNIBAM, and from day to day, I realized that there was a need for to do more for the women of the community.
Yeah.
And therefore, eventually in 2011, I started off what was doing as what was called conversations. And these conversations eventually went into the idea of educating women on educating them on the issues and the laws of what affect them or do not affect them. And so that was why we were I started off doing these things for women.
So you were originally a part of the larger organization UNIBAM and then moved to look at specifically women's issues.
Yes, I am still the president of UNIBAM,
Okay.
but I wanted to look specifically at women issues, as you said, and moving the conversations, moving it along, to the next level.
Yeah.
And I must say that one of the things was encouraged also to move it to the next level by my friend Kelvin Ramnares.
Now let me ask you, because when we talk about, especially when we say UNIBAM or we talk about the homosexual population in Belize, the typical person that comes to mind, or I should say population that comes to mind, are MSMs, men who have sex with men. And in fact, it's been a part of the wider conversation anytime you speak of UNIBAM. What are the issues that particularly affect women who are homosexuals or bisexuals in Belize that you feel are forefront issues that we have to start to discuss?
Let me speak to that and my involvement with what became PETAL in December 2015. I met Simone at one of the Women's Month activities in 2013 or 2012, somewhere around there. And around the table, there's a conversation of women who were muttering around the table as the event is going on in the broader, saying, oh, this doesn't, they're not dealing with us, they're not talking about us. And my attitude always is about women claiming their space. I actually was doing a presentation that morning about women claiming their space. And I am a major subscriber to gender justice, social justice, economic justice. And my attitude has always been for the people who are not included, we have got to make spaces. So I heard that. And then later on in that same year, Simone approached me about getting involved with women of the lesbian and bisexual community, saying that we need to do something, can you help us? I don't know how to do it. And my attitude is, sure, we can start by looking at the issues that women go through, because it's a little bit different in your relationships. That was one of the first things we started looking at. How do you engage in relationships? What about violence in lesbian and bisexual relationships? What goes on? Is it any different? How do you approach it? Who do you go to? Who supports you? So it's those kinds of things that impact women who are in lesbian, especially lesbian relationships, where the myth is that you're both women if it's a lesbian relationship. So you should know that
Two
I
gentle
don't
people coming together, right?
supposedly. But we know violence comes out
Yeah.
of power relations. And so it's all those issues that started the conversation in my involvement, but it evolved into what PETAL is looking at, empowering women.
Yeah.
And can I just jump in and ask a question? Because Simone raised a very important point, talking about being a subset within a larger group. And very often, it's easier within the Belizean society to say, okay, you don't have to declare anything, or people, you know, you're almost invisible, and it's good because you get no attention. Why step forward and say, listen, we're here and we want to be recognized?
Well, one of the things is, William, is that we as women have always been per se in the back seat. And I wanted, it was just to bring awareness to that we are here and we have needs, and women on a whole seem to be oppressed, for lack of a better word. And I wanted to have the women realize, make them aware of what the laws are, and let the policymakers know that we are here and we are not just under nobody, or we are not afraid of voicing our concerns.
Carice, why align yourself or get involved in an organization when it's easier, the same question, to just say, listen, I'm going to go about my business and not get involved, especially in something, given the struggles that we've seen with Caleb, for example, and the Unibam challenge, and what the kind of heat that had brought in Belizean society?
Why affiliate myself with it? Well, actually, I was there from the inception, and so when Simone spoke to me about it, she always spoke about it. And so when she said, you know, she wanted to do this and she wanted to do that, and, you know, for women and for this particular group of women, because people are always, as you said, you don't have that body for just the lesbi population to directly deal with the things that affect them directly and indirectly. And being a woman as well, I was all up for it. I'm not afraid of change. I'm not afraid to get out there and help fight a battle that, as a woman, I find that I would support, and to some extent is necessary. So I affiliated myself with it because I wanted to be a part of something that will benefit a lot of women. We always hear from the conversations and, you know, speaking with the women, they tell us a lot of things, and you want to know that you're able to help, and help on maybe a bigger scale. And so I wanted to be a part of that.
Let's try to paint the picture here. When we talk about the victimization faced by the LGBT community, there have been very public issues that have been brought forward. William gave the example of Caleb. We remember Champagne Paris and her brutal attacks in public that took place as an issue that transgender persons face. What are some of the issues that affect lesbian and bisexual women in Belize that are not discussed?
A lot of the issues are women issues. And in the conversations that has formed almost 2 years of operation before PETAL evolved into an NGO incorporated, we have found that when you look at the laws of Belize, they don't quite cover same-sex relationships. So it's looking at legislation that exists. How do women who are in same-sex relationships, how do they benefit? And if they're in a same-sex relationship today that involves children that they bring to the relationship, how do you benefit from the state? How do you get the support that you need? And a lot of these are women issues. PETAL in its primary objective is to look at justice for all women. It's not just about lesbian and bisexual, it's all women. Of course, with a special focus on this subset of women. But the issues are more the women issues of how legislation is set up, how support is provided, how the domestic violence law impacts lesbian relationships. It is a lot of issues around how we plan and what programmings exist. And subtle things go on. The prejudices against women are more subtle in terms of how they're treated, and those are some of the issues. They're not what would you say, the high
Profile.
of the champagne issues or those kinds of things that are horrible to begin with to any human being, but they're more subtle issues that have to be dealt with.
Do you ever feel outwardly discriminated against for your sexual orientation? Is that a part of what we're hearing from the group of women that you're working with?
Yes, and for myself, I can say that I have seen it. As Dr. McKay say, you have the subtle. And I remember living in a house, and the landowner was, he did not wanted us in the house because he realized it was two women, and that these, he was a Christian, he said, and that he did not agree to that. And so I was highly upset because I was wondering, two women living in a house, what does that have to do with it? But people, the way that I dress, and so people automatically perceive that, oh, you're a lesbian. And so again, going back to what Dr. McKay said, it's the subtle things. And I see it also when like working. I remember where I was working, I had the support of my my boss, but the people on the job and how they outrightly would say things to you in my capacity as a supervisor, and how they would come out to you and lash out at you, you know. And so all these things, in my opinion, doing the work for women, I look at these things, and there's so many things that you hear that now how you go about changing it, and how people just feel the need, or it's their right to come out and lash out against you.
Cherise, you have any examples in terms
Yes,
of?
I do. It's, in the same regard, in the workplace, I get it a lot. It's because for some people, what does a lesbian look like? Am I supposed to look a particular way? And so somebody, they're like, oh, you know, you must be a lesbian, and if they should come to that realization, they would say rude things, and then they don't want to be in my presence, like they would not want to be in the bathroom with me and things like that, like I'm going to do something, you know.
Wow. You know, globally, one of the issues that lesbians and bisexual women tend to have to face is extreme and outward sexual harassment. Verbally, they're told very inappropriate things in all factions of society.
That's true.
Now, before we even move into bisexual and lesbian women, that's something women in Belize and young girls are struggling with from, you know, very indecent ages, inappropriate ages. What is it like for the population in Belize? Is that something that we are also seeing here?
Yes, we are also seeing that, and the harassment of people who are young and struggling with it. Remember, people are struggling with their parents coming out to their parents, to their family, and also if somebody maybe guess if they have friends who are who identify as lesbian or bisexual, and so they will have harassment going on there also.
Yeah.
Now, how do you deal, and Abby, I guess this question, sorry, Dr. McKay. How do you look at a situation like this and do advocacy work for it, especially when people think, I'm taking the moral high ground? and I'm using what the Bible says and so many other things, and you're not going to engage me in this conversation because whether it's renting a house, I don't support that. You know, they say that and it's justification. How do you get people to come to the table and have a conversation, especially when for years there has been the conversation centered around these are basic human rights?
And that is what we have to focus on, the rights of each individual as a human being. And we know in Belize we struggle with that in a lot of spheres, not just in identity, but some poor people don't have access to, because they're poor, they don't have access to, their rights are not covered. So, and actually the lesbian bisexual group of women, they have intersections of a lot of these issues of poverty, of a space, whether it is renting a safe space, they may be raped. Some of these women may be forcibly taught a lesson in some situation. A number of issues that are women issues. They are women issues. And so advocating from the human rights approach is critical and constant. And the Christian Bible, I was raised Christian just as most everybody in Belize were. And in Christianity, I happen to have read sufficiently to know that Jesus Christ was one of the best advocates for women's rights, because Christianity was around women and children who were the underdogs in the society at the time. And to me, that is one of the reflections. And I would challenge anybody who claims to be Christian on that basis. And in fact, I do, on that basis. As a Christian and following Christian principles, we know that we are supposed to take care of those who are the ostracized, who are less than, who are treated with all those things. So there are two levels. The moral one, it's not a moral high ground. It's actually a moral low ground. And I think we have to call it what it is. From a personal perspective, that is what I would say. From a professional and the technical piece is human rights. The laws of the world, universal rights indicate that we must, the state and anybody who's in power has a responsibility to all members of the society.
Now, I want to jump in and ask one other question, because a big part of the conversation has been shaped when you talk about LGBT rights in general. People look at what happens in America, and very often, one, they start saying, this is not a Belizean agenda, it's a foreign agenda. And two, we can't allow certain things because we're going down a slippery slope. What they're going to ask for next? Marriage or this or that, etc. So how do you get people to even have the conversation?
You do the work of having the conversation. So Open Your Eyes is doing a fantastic contribution to the conversation that is public. That one, you have to be prepared to stand up and step out. I was one of the persons involved when BFLA first began 26 or so years ago out of Dangriga. And I understand fully what went on then. Similar things went on. Same kinds of arguments about...
That we still hear today.
Yes, exactly. But it exists because a group of women and men who saw the need for it, said, no, we will persevere because we need to provide some basic rights and services to women who otherwise, if somebody else does not have the voice for them, will not get the support. So BFLA has done something over the last quarter century of really fighting. And that's the kind of work that I see PETAL being able to do. That is my involvement, because it's a service for all women at the end of the day, not just lesbian and bisexual women.
So let me ask the question, in terms of being able to acknowledge that today is the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. We have seen, in the case of Unabam, in the case of Caleb, and in the case of other persons who step forward, that publicly, you may be out to your family, but publicly stepping in front of a camera on live television and announcing to the rest of the country and even the diaspora who tunes in very frequently that you are a lesbian or you identify as a lesbian or bisexual woman may open you up to things that perhaps you weren't exposed to before. And I know that that was definitely a consideration you made in even having a public launch and having an organization formulated. What was that process like for you? Was it a no-brainer? I'm going to do this because I believe in it. Did you speak it over with your family members? Did you all speak to each other to kind of decide how you'll support each other?
Well, one of the things is, Marlene, I have thought about this many years ago, and I quickly want to mention that, as I said at the launch, that this goes back a long time ago when I first, when there was a doctor who came, and it was through Pahohu, and he had come, and all were encouraged from the community at that time to come and hear this doctor speak. And I realized eventually that it shifted into that HIV MSM at the time. And so nothing truly was done for women. Women felt left out. I went away from this country, and when I came back home, I realized nothing was still being done. And it just so happened that I linked up with Unibam, but at the time I was very busy, was not as involved as I would have liked to be, until later on, as I became vice president and then the president. And that it was always a no-brainer for me. I did speak to mainly my sister, not so much my mother, but my sisters. And then I had the support of other like women, and I was following a friend of mine, Martha, and I realized that there was a need. I asked within the community if they believed that there was a need for a women's organization. And they were like, yes, you had the support of not all of the people, but at least some of the women who realized that there was a need for it.
And your process?
Well, it was a no-brainer because for me, people will think what they want to regardless. So it's not to, imagine what happened when I go to work, or no, not necessarily, because I have always been stereotyped. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. That was, we want to do it, we should do it, let's make it happen.
Now, when you bring an organization to the fore, obviously getting the support on an individual basis sometimes is much of a struggle. And you spoke and you said something very early on, Simone, about providing support for younger people who may actually be struggling or going through a process of their own. Society doesn't always embrace that because they always think that, listen, this is a choice, and that by exposing my child, or if I hear my child is exposed to people, and I'll use just the word people, in a particular lifestyle, then immediately, they're trying to convert them or whatever. How do you offer support, especially given the fact that through the work with BFLA, for example, and creating a safe space for young people, very often that's one of the things that you come in conflict with. How do you deal with younger individuals who may not, under the law, be adults and still subjected to their parents in terms of trying to say, listen, we're here to support you, but it has to be in such a way that you're constantly battling with the wider society and parents and their parental rights?
Well, one of the things I want to say is that I always had a vision and about getting parents involved. In fact, I spoke with my mother, not in full length, but I spoke with my mother, and I realized that it is from parents, and there are parents out there. I had a friend when the constitutional challenge was brought. The day when I left the court, I went to my daughter's school, and I met a friend who I hadn't seen in a long while. And she had told me a story about her son and how she felt about her son being threatened, and she was scared for his life. And I realized then that we should focus on parents, because there are parents out there who would love, who want to support their children, and so we should focus on that. And I also have been where I was doing a training, and one of my friends from high school told me about her daughter. And I got in contact with her and told her, well, we were doing a training, and if your daughter would like to be involved, but we need your consent since she is under the age of 18 years old. And so she told me to speak with her daughter. I spoke with her, and the mother agreed and gave the consent, and the child wanted to come. And yes, so that is the way I see dealing with young people.
Indeed. So she encapsulates it extremely well, because it's true for anybody who's under 18, you need parental consent. That's one. So we can't work with young people unless, and with an issue such as this that the society is not open arms about, that is critical. The other piece that Simone rightly speaks about, families who are suffering because their children are suffering, and what support do we provide to those families as well. So I think it speaks to the wider, from the perspective I come as the technical advisor to PETAL or to any women's group or to any group where we are trying to improve the situation and conditions of individuals, but families as well, because we have the bigger problem of family issues, family health. The mental health of our country is a big part of what is also included in this effort.
So I want to ask, in terms of support that you've gotten so far outside of just the community, since the inception of, or since you had the idea in 2015 and moving to the launch that you held last week, you've gotten support from, even, I was telling you before the break, the US ambassador, but you've gotten support from people outside of the community. What has that been like for you, having started the journey saying, I wasn't sure if this was needed or wanted by the community, because quite frankly, the lesbian and bisexual community can fly under the radar, so to speak, to have the support of others. What is that like for you? What does it mean for you?
It means a lot, Marlene, to have others being there. It's been surreal, even though I knew what sitting at the table with Suzanne and Tina at one time, and Norma. It's surreal, you know, like going into everything, seeing it go moving forward, and like, for example, getting the support of the US ambassador. For me, I still haven't really, you know, digest all of it as yet, but it means a lot. And coming into a day like today, Ida Hot Day, I really cannot explain how, you know, and with Caleb, Unibam, the struggle, all of that, it is good to see more of us stepping out and being there and showing that support, that visible support, you know. So I feel good. I feel good, and now that you have said it, and now I'm sitting here thinking about it more, it's very exciting, you know, truly exciting.
What would you say would be the number one priority you have in your plan of action at this point? You're a new organization. There are many areas you can go. What would you say is the number one priority at this point?
To provide psychosocial support for women. That is the number one priority.
For all women?
For all women.
Okay. All right.
And how can people get in touch with PETAL if they want to find out more?
Well, PETAL has an email address, petalbelize, bze@gmail.com. And we also have a phone number, 607-4865.
And it has an office at number 17 Bishop Street.
And you're on
Belize.
Facebook, right?
Yes, we're on Facebook.
All right. Well, ladies, thank you very much for joining us, and definitely a timely conversation on the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia to have you here talking about your newest organization. So best of luck.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take our final break, and when we come back, we'll have our wrap-up, so stay tuned.